Hi y'all, and welcome back to the garden. So if you live in Ohio or parts of the Northeast, you may not have been spending very much time outside over the past couple weeks, and I haven't either because I'm really sensitive to smoke and bad air, and I've been coughing, and I almost started losing my voice earlier this week. So I've not done a whole lot in the garden, and it had been kind of dry, but we finally got a little thunderstorm last night. And I want to take you around and show you some things. I originally planned for this video to be about an update on the annuals, both in the ground and in containers. I am still going to do that video update today, but because we had so much rain last night, the actual containers themselves are looking kind of puny, so I'll have to update you in a separate video on those. We'll probably talk mostly about the in-ground things right now. And then I'll show you some things that are blooming or that are looking good and about to bloom, and we'll just get started. So first off, the SunPatiens that I planted, this is Tropical Rose, I think was the name of it, are looking really good. They've held up really well to the fountain splashing, which I've turned off for now. I'm having issues with these geraniums. Petals falling in there and then clogging the filter, so we'll have to readjust that. These got as big or much bigger than I thought they were going to be very quickly, and this is, let's see, the biggest they've maybe been, and they've dropped so many petals in there this year. It's just been a nightmare to keep clean, but the actual SunPatiens are looking really good. I just turned that fountain off a week ago, so they survived all the splashback and everything. There was some initial burning and crisping because they were getting more sun than I thought they wanted, and they're still kind of slow to produce some blooms here, but they're finally bulking up, and I think they'll get going here really nicely. I really love these. They're working really well out front too under the Sweet Bay Magnolia, so they are putting on a good amount of blooms out there and providing a nice pop of color and more shade. We can also discuss some of the perennials that are starting to rebloom or initially blooming for the first time. A lot of the Echinaceas that I have are blooming. So we have White Perfection down here that I think I may have showed you in a video not too long ago that was starting. I love the petals and the actual blooms on this Echinacea. They're so perfect and a brilliant white with just a ton of little petals around there. So that's a really nice winner for you there. And here we have the Cherry Chocolate Latte Hibiscus, and it is producing buds. So this is much earlier. These typically bloom probably about 3 weeks from now, so we'll see how quickly these bud up. But I mentioned a few videos ago that these were progressing a little earlier this year because we did have such warm weather so early, and you can see how they filled out the space pretty nicely under this crabapple right here that I planted in the spring. Down here we have some more Echinaceas. I'll have to put the name of these on the screen. I think maybe they're cantaloupe, supreme cantaloupe. I can't remember the name, but look at those. The blooms are actually huge, and they're this perfect, brilliant cantaloupe color. And this year, all of my alliums that I planted last year from bare root, or maybe it was the year, when did I plant these? Last spring? Yes, they're starting to bloom and they're looking really nice. So you can see how more blue the foliage are on these than Millennium. So these are Serendipity by Proven Winners. And there's actually some down here. I don't know why those are a little behind. These are the same variety and they're in full bloom here already. So it's been interesting to watch all the Alliums in my garden because some of them have bloomed much earlier than the others, even though these are 10 feet away difference, and they should get pretty much about the same amount of sunlight. These may actually get less because they're going to be blocked from the evening sun by this shed. This is how this container is progressing. I'm actually probably going to come through and cut this back a little bit. It has grown crazy, and we received such heavy rain, it's kind of drooping right now. But the Jamesbrittenia, I'm really interested in this because it seems to be more like a trailing plant, but it is also growing up at the top there. So the pink cashmere verbena is doing really well. Saffron finch petunia is also doing well. And of course, I've loved the Bermuda Beach. It did not fare the weather quite as well as the rest of these annuals did, but that's a good comparison for you to know what might work or what might look really good after a rain downfall for those of you who get a lot of rain, and it seems to be the verbena stands up much better than the petunias do. We're starting to get a lot of daylilies bloom. So this is Salome Double Classic back here that I moved from in front of the Incrediballs hydrangea hedge. That one, I don't think it's being produced anymore, so it's kind of hard to find, but I love it because it's this peachy color, and I think it's happier here. It's producing more blooms and more sun than it did in front of the Incrediballs hydrangea hedge. We have a lot more here too that haven't produced blooms yet. But also I'm really impressed with these wee whites. They're still looking really good and performing better than I thought they would out here in more evening sun. The Oh So Easy roses, these are double pink, are looking a little ratty this time of year. It's kind of standard after they do their first flush. I need to come through and cut back all of these little bouquets of roses here. You can see they grow in almost perfect bouquets that you can just cut and add to vases really nicely. But when it gets this time of year and all the petals fall off and what's left turns brown, just needs a little cutback. So we'll work on that over the next week, maybe, if the temperatures stay nice. Here's another beautiful Echinacea. I think this one is called, I always want to call it Pink Puff, and I don't think that's the name of it. I'll see if I can find what this one is and put it on the screen too, but it's really lovely too. It's a double. I have not been super impressed with the size of these Snow Queen's blooms. It's been in the ground a year and a half almost, I think it is, and they just seem really small to me. And maybe they get larger as it gets more settled in, which happens with hydrangeas, but for me they just seem really puny to be an oak leaf hydrangea. We're getting some really good blooming out of this yarrow. This is the Firefly series, and I really like this color. It's like a coral color. It's called Peach, I think, Firefly Peach or something similar to that. It did not bloom very good last year. These have been in the ground 2 years-ish, so I haven't had the best luck in my garden with yarrow because they like pretty dry conditions, but these have come along much better in their second year. So maybe they just take a little while to get established, and I still don't think they love clay soil that as much because I've never seen them perform quite as well as I have in pictures of other people's gardens. And maybe they just need more sun that I'm giving them, but elsewhere in my garden where I have these planted where they're getting more sun, they're still not performing as good as I've seen in photos. But this is a really, really lovely bloom, and they look really great in flower arrangements as well. So this is one, if you don't have in your garden, there's also a yellow version. I think there's a few more versions of it, but this color is my favorite. It has like yellow pollen and corally orange looking petals. My golden ticket privet that I purchased 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now maybe, after this fence was put in. I actually planted these maybe before the fence went in. It's not recovering very well from winter, so there was some dieback I need to come through and prune off. They actually, I guess, recovered not very well. It's not a good statement. They have recovered very well, but there was die-off that I wasn't expecting from these shrubs, and they haven't grown as quickly to cover the dead shrubs as I would have expected them to. So they still look really good. It's just there's these branches right here where they lost leaves over winter because we had that really cold freeze over Christmas and New Year's that they just did not produce any more buds on. So those just need to be trimmed back a little bit. And these could be shaped like any other privet. So you could come back with a hedge trimmer and make that an easy process for you. Or you could selectively clip. And I will probably selectively clip on these just to get these dead ends off here. After all of these years, this Arctic sun, I think it is, dogwood, which has yellow stems, is finally looking really good. It's been 2 years since this was planted. It was planted from a 4-inch container, so those take a while to get settled in. But this year it's looking really good, and I'm happy for that. Of course, you can see with the storm what these Incrediballs look like after the storm. They still are pretty droopy, but the supports that I added this spring have helped so much. But these have definitely bulked up since I showed you over the past week, so you can see how big those blooms are right there. I love this hedge. This is north. I have people ask all the time. This is northwest facing. So they get pretty, like on today's, like today, it's very diffuse because it's very cloudy. But they get more like evening sun just a little bit at the end of the day from this direction. And they tend to want to stretch towards the light a little bit, but they've actually done really well this year. Whenever we have bad thunderstorms, sometimes they come from this direction and they hit the wall, the wind does, and pushes these forward really bad. We haven't had one of those this year yet, so they're looking really, really good and actually much fuller towards the back than they ever have. You can see they have split a little bit from the storm last night, but after the storm subsides and they get a little more sun, they will perk right back up and be back to where they were. But one thing I want to mention, which a viewer brought up in the last video, these smell. A lot of hydrangeas don't really have a scent, and I'm not sure if it's Annabelle's type hydrangeas. I've never owned an Annabelle exactly that variety, which is the precursor to this one, but Incrediball has a scent, and it is really, really lovely. It's not like overpowering like a lot of scents. It's very light, but when you walk through here, you can definitely get the floral scent from them. So I have not noticed that on any of my other Annabelle arborescens hydrangeas. Maybe they do, and maybe I just don't have enough of them in volume, or they're all much smaller than these. But these have a really beautiful, beautiful scent to them, and really gorgeous this time of year. It's not time to cut them yet. You maybe could. They would most likely wilt. They need a little more longer to stay on the stems, in my opinion, to get them to stay nice and papery. So maybe in a couple more weeks you could cut these. They'll start turning green maybe in the middle of July when the limelights and the peniculatas start blooming. But it's looking really, really nice right now. I'm not sure what it is about this location, but the SunPatiens have not done very well at all. And maybe they're just in a slight lull. They should still get plenty of sun. They bulked up really nicely, but hardly any blooms, which is really disappointing. Meanwhile, the begonias are killing it. So they have bulked up quite a bit. You can go back to the video where I planted these, and they were the tiny, you know, like 6-pack size. And I have not watered these. I mean, they get overhead water from the sprinkler system a few times a week, but there's like no drip irrigation here. There's only drip on the bigger shrubs. So you can actually see the black tubing right there that runs along the shrubs, and I actually showed installing that on a video. But they've done really well. This is kind of northeast facing, and so they get morning sun and then evening sun, and they're shaded by a bigger tree during the day. But they performed really well for me. They look a little rough this morning from the rain. Some of the petals are a little rough, but they still look really nice overall and bulking up quite well. Essentially about the same size, which I'm impressed with, because I think the white or the pink was a little smaller initially. Maybe it was the white. I can't remember, but they're virtually the same size now, so growing very nice. And those hydrangeas are looking really good too. We can get a closer look at those in case you didn't see the last video. This is Proven Winners Let's Dance Can Do, which used to be called Let's Dance Can, and they changed the name. So if you have Can, it is the same variety as this one. And they're putting on new growth too. So look at these new stems that are much taller than the ones below it. This container is looking pretty nice here. These are some more of those petunias, a lot of those that you saw on the other one. We do have Supertunia Vista Jazzberry, which is a bit closed up from the rain. Supertunia Saffron Finch. This is Solar Power 𝗖𝗢𝗦𝗢𝗢𝗡𝗢, or sweet potato vine. We had some of the cashmere pink verbena in here. There's some back there, but it's getting a little lost around all of these Supertunias and potato vines that are growing very vigorously in here. And I think we have lost the, there it is in here, but it's not making it very well. There was some Dichondra Silver Falls in here, and it was not able to outcompete these other trailing annuals. So test for yourself, but you probably want things that are slower growing if you're planting 𝗣𝗟𝗧𝗦. These hydrangeas are coming along really nicely too. Bloom struck, still producing these nice buds, so these are going to look really great. And this is the new pop star from Endless Summer Hydrangeas, and it's producing all sorts of buds as well. Here are the SunPatiens out front. This is the same one. This is Tropical Rose, and they are bulking up just as much, if not more, than the ones out back. Also, I planted a verbena in this bed last year, and I don't know if these are seedlings coming up everywhere. It's like a seed-grown verbena, but I will never plant that stuff again. It is almost, I think it's coming from rhizomes. Like, look at this from last year. I can't get rid of it. I keep pulling it, and it keeps coming back. So I don't think I'm going to be planting that variety. I'll have to look and see what variety that was I grew from seed. It is coming up everywhere, and I only planted like 1 or 2 plants of it in here because I just grew a few of them from seed, and it's coming up over here, down there, like everywhere. Really concerned. That's a kind of invasive one that I will not be planting again because I do not like to deal with those type plants. I'm not sure if I showed you the astilbe that I planted 3 or 4 years ago now, probably closer to 4 or 5. I know I planted it, I think I picked these up the year of COVID, so maybe 3 years ago, early in the spring, and you can see how nice and thick those are. And I told you in a previous video, this one gets a little more sun and it slowly gets less sun down here. And you can see how tiny that one is and how much further behind. Now the bloom stalks are still probably going to get just as tall, but it's a little behind development wise, like the others here. And here we have a nice blue, this is tiny tough stuff hydrangea. That one's almost blue. The only issue I've had with these hydrangeas is they do tend to not bloom very well on the top of the plant in our zone because they are reblooming mountain hydrangeas, but the first flush is usually lower and it's hard to see because it is older growth, and so the newer growth kind of pushes out on top of it and doesn't produce buds quite as quickly, and then you're left with kind of blooms that you can't see that well. And these probably don't get as much sun as they would like either. So if they had more sun, they might be more happy. Let's take a quick look at these. These containers are also looking pretty good. I don't know that I'm loving the cherry drop Coleus. I thought it was going to be more of a trailer like chocolate drop. It doesn't appear to be. It's getting, the leaves are getting much bigger than I would have expected them to. Chocolate drop, which I really like, trails. It has tiny leaves and it trails and falls. And when I planted it, that's what I intended in this container. Right here, I'm not getting any of that. We're getting some trailing from the Supertunias. This is Imperial Blue. It's not a new Supertunias, but the Bermuda Beach and Saffron Finch is looking really good, as well as the Red Hawk Sweet Potato Vine. But this variety is not what I intended its growth, and that's probably my fault. I should have looked at how this one grows, but because it was called cherry drop, I thought it was going to behave like chocolate drop, and it's just not doing that for me. I really loved how this bed has come out throughout the years. I did have some dieback on the lavenders this year, and I did something different. I cut them back in the fall halfway, which I've never done, and we had that really, really bad cold snap between Christmas and New Year's, and it just, some of them just lost complete sections. Now they're filling out nicely, and by the end of the season, I don't know that you would be able to tell. And they look really good up there, but it just makes me sad that we have just 1 or 2 in the whole hedge that look like this after all these years. But I like how all the perennials have mingled in this spot. We've got Millennium Alliums that are several years old now, and they could probably maybe use some dividing, that are looking really good. You can see how thick those bunches are back there. This is an ornamental oregano called Drops of Jupiter that has just gotten massive this year. And these are some phlox that could probably use some cut back, that I don't know that they rebloom for me, but they may sporadically towards the end of the season. All of the 𝗗𝗏𝗧𝗦 that I planted last year is doing really well, especially those that are kind of tucked under this Japanese maple, getting a little more sun, a little more shade than the rest of it. I need to come through and thin some of this von Stein lamb's ear. It's my favorite because it doesn't bloom, or it doesn't produce a bloom for me, but it can be kind of it's not super vigorous, but it does bulk up really quickly. So you just kind of at the spring have to cut that back, pull it up a little bit if you want to keep it contained. It's not one that I wouldn't plant. I actually love it quite a lot, but you just have to keep an eye on it over the years. Nothing too labor intensive. The sedums, since the spruce was removed, are massive this year, and they're going to be beautiful. They're already starting to bloom. This is just Autumn Joy, which is a really old variety, but really gorgeous. And now let's talk about some of the annuals in this location, because I'm having some really weird things going on with the blue suede shoes, rockin' blue suede shoes Salvia, which is an annual from Proven Winners. Now, this is it. That is also it. So all the ones around this side of the tree look incredible. And then we have these right here on this side of the tree that look really horrible. And I have absolutely no idea why. These look like they might be snapping out of whatever it is. They do look like they're deficient for something. So maybe if I come through and give them some fertilizer, since they're so yellow, that might help. I just don't know what it is. The only thing I can think of is more of the spruce roots that were here, maybe around here, or it may be pulling some nitrogen from the soil. I don't really know, but I know it doesn't look great, and I'm not impressed with how they're growing. So I need to come through and try and give them a little fertilizer or something to see if we can make those feel better. The Bracken's Brown Beauty Magnolia itself is looking really great. It's put out a ton of new growth. So really fresh leaves. They're really pliable. They just unfurled, and I'm shocked at how much growth it's put on just since it was planted. You can basically see here the older leaves. So this is the old leaves. It's put on probably this much. What is that, less than a foot, maybe 8 inches or so of growth, and it was just planted this spring. So definitely a good grower for us up here. And it was looking really puny because we had all of that hot weather super early, and it had a hard time keeping enough water on it. But now that it's settled in a little more and starting to spread out its roots, and we've gotten some break from the weather, it is looking really good. The Alliums, these are Bubble Bath from Walter's Gardens, are gonna bloom this year, which I'm really excited about. I was afraid I wouldn't get blooms on Alliums. Sometimes you don't. Your first year when you plant them, they spend their time getting settled. These are gonna look really good, I think. The Dahlias Mystic Illusion Purple was looking really good. I also want to show you these Astilbe. So this is Dark Side of the Moon, and they are putting on their blooms, and look how brilliant that is. Gorgeous. And I think we're going to end right here. I never came and staked my Dahlias, and with the storm we had last night, you can see what resulted in that. They've kind of blown over a little bit. So I'm going to have to come and do that this weekend. But we do have some gorgeous ones that overwintered in the ground or in the raised bed gardens. Check this out. Awesome. And this is really early. A lot of people were asking, how are you getting dahlia blooms this early? These were overwintered in raised beds, and they survived. I did lose about half of them, so I think that was more of a water issue. I did cover them, but I think they got a little too wet, a lot of them, and they could have just froze over that winter, and then they got really mushy. And so the ones that survived, a lot of them still looked really mushy. There were tubers on there that looked mushy, but there were enough good ones that they've come back really well. So I'm really happy with how these are coming along. Oh, this looks like the one that was randomly in my garden last year that I have no idea where it came from. I think it may have been a seed grown one, and it survived. Awesome. So I can't tell you the variety on this one, and this is its first bloom, so it looks a little different than they typically do, but they're coming along really nicely. So thank y'all for following along, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. See you soon. Bye.